So imagine waking up, right? You pour your morning coffee, you open up your analytics dashboard, and you just see a flat line.
Oh man, pure terror.
Right. A literal 90% drop in your website traffic.
Hmm.
And, you know, it didn't taper off over a few months. It vanished overnight.
Yeah, the immediate physical reaction for anyone running a business in that scenario would just be total panic. I mean, your stomach drops, your chest gets tight.
Exactly. You'd assume your company was practically dead on arrival.
And, well, that assumption actually makes complete sense when your entire worldview of digital business is built around this idea that volume solves everything. Like, if you believe eyeballs equal revenue, then losing eyeballs means you're bleeding out.
Yeah. Which brings us to the exact nightmare that a guy named Drew Canole lived through. So he built this massive health and wellness brand called FitLife.tv. And they had something like 1.2 million highly engaged followers on Facebook.
Wow, yeah, they were basically the king of their specific mountain.
They were. But then the algorithm shifted. The platform tweaked just, a few lines of code in the background. And suddenly their reach just completely evaporated.
Which really exposes the fundamental vulnerability of building your castle on rented land. I mean, you don't own the distribution channel.
Right. You're entirely at the mercy of the digital landlord.
Hmm.
So FitLife is suddenly bleeding capital. They were spending $116 in advertising just to acquire a single customer for a $97 product.
Ouch. Yeah, so mathematically, they are losing $19 every single time someone clicks the buy button.
Exactly. And, you don't have to be an accountant to know that is a complete death spiral. So they call in an outside consultant. And they're just desperate for this guy to do some, digital plumbing.
Right, they want them to tweak their ad copy or maybe manipulate the targeting.
Yeah, exactly. Find some hidden backdoor in the algorithm to magically restore all that traffic volume.
Because they wanted a surface level fix for what was actually a complete structural collapse. I mean, they diagnosed themselves as having a traffic problem.
But the consultant looks at their metrics, completely ignores the plummeting traffic graph, and delivers a diagnosis that sounds, frankly, borderline delusional.
Hmm.
He tells them, you don't have a traffic problem. Losing that traffic might actually be the catalyst that forces you to build something exponentially more profitable.
Wow, I love that.
Right. He identified that they had a funnel problem. And the reason we are exploring this today is because that paradigm shift is basically the foundation of the architecture we are about to unpack.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We've designed this essential audio overview specifically for you, our YouTube audience, to really deconstruct the exact blueprint that pulled FitLife.tv out of a tailspin and turned it into a multi-million-dollar empire.
Yeah, and the source text we're analyzing today is .com Secrets by Russell Brunson. And this text is just a fascinating anomaly in the business world because it directly attacks a very specific, very pervasive fallacy.
Which is what exactly? Well, there is this collective delusion that internet marketing requires constantly chasing the shiny new object. Like, we're told we constantly need to master the newest TikTok trend or, exploit a temporary loophole in a search engine or jump on the latest AI tool before the window closes.
Oh, totally. The endless hamster wheel of tactics.
Exactly. But if you look at the foreword to this book, it's actually written by Dan Kennedy. And for those who don't know, Kennedy is an absolute titan in the world of direct response marketing.
Right. The old school data-driven methodology of getting a consumer to take an immediate, measurable action.
Precisely. So Kennedy quotes General Norm Schwarzkopf, who famously said, "Shine shoes, save lives."
Which sounds completely absurd. Like, how does shoe polish stop a bullet?
Right, but Schwarzkopf's point was really about the psychology of discipline. Like, in the absolute chaos of a combat zone, fundamental discipline is the only thing that actually holds a unit together. And Kennedy maps that directly to commerce.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Yeah. In the chaotic, ever-changing landscape of digital media, it's not the undisciplined pursuit of shiny new hacks that keeps a business alive. It is the rigid, foundational rules of direct response that actually survive the test of time.
Well, let me just pause you there and maybe challenge that framing a bit, because the book is literally titled .com Secrets. But listening to this framing about direct response and old school discipline, I mean, is the title a bit of a bait and switch? Are we really just talking about 1980s infomercial tactics dressed up with, like a sleek Silicon Valley aesthetic?
That is actually a phenomenal read on the situation, and the author himself openly admits the title leans into that expectation, right? But the core material exists to bridge a massive historical gap.
How so?
What Brunson did was take the old school direct mail strategies. So the late night infomercials, the classified ads, the incredibly complex direct mail sequences that companies use to spend millions testing in the postal system. And he basically translated their underlying psychological frameworks into the architecture of the modern web.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he takes the invisible back-end processes that separate, say, a hobbyist blog making a few $1,000s a year from an 8-figure enterprise, and he forces you to look at the structural mechanics.
You know, the genesis of his obsession with this is actually quite funny. Brunson talks about being a 12-year-old kid in the early 90s, literally staying up late to watch those cheesy infomercials.
Oh, yeah, guys like Don Lapry.
Exactly. Don Lapry pitching systems on how to make money, placing, quote, tiny little classified ads. Lapry would place a cheap ad, figure out the math to make a $30 profit, and then just relentlessly scale it across thousands of local newspapers.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah. But while normal kids were out playing video games, Brunson was literally calling 1-800 numbers and ordering junk mail just to study the physical paper trails. He wanted to see how the envelopes were structured, what the follow-up letters looked like, how they handled the upsells over the phone.
Right. He realized early on that a website isn't just a digital brochure. It's supposed to be a digitized version of that exact psychological gauntlet.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the central thesis of the entire framework. And honestly, this is a concept that fundamentally breaks how most people view customer acquisition. The golden rule, which serves as the spine for everything we are going to explore, is this, quote, ultimately, the business that can spend the most to acquire a customer wins.
Yeah, the business that can spend the most to acquire a customer wins.
I have to admit, the first time I read that, my brain completely rejected it. Like, in any traditional business class, the primary directive is always cost reduction. You want to spend the absolute least amount of money possible to acquire a customer to maximize your margin. Bidding higher sounds like financial suicide.
Well, it sounds like suicide until you really understand the underlying economic environment of digital advertising. I mean, the internet operates almost entirely on auction-based platforms.
Right.
Whether you are running ads on search engines or social media feeds, you are constantly bidding in real time against your competitors for a user's attention. And what happens in any auction?
The prices inevitably rise.
Exactly. More competitors enter the market, venture capital floods the space, and the cost to acquire a single click just perpetually inflates.
So trying to fight your way to the cheapest click is basically a race to the bottom. It's a game you are mathematically guaranteed to lose over a long enough timeline.
Spot on. And that brings us right back to the FitLife.tv scenario. They were selling a product for $97, but the auction environment forced their customer acquisition cost to $116.
Which is where the panic sets in.
Right. Most entrepreneurs in that position panic and try to, hack their way back to an $80 acquisition cost. But Brunson's methodology says, ignore the acquisition cost. Fix the architecture.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
Well, what if, instead of stopping at that $97 transaction, FitLife implemented a system that naturally, logically guided that same customer to purchase, say, a complimentary $200 package a week later, and then maybe a $50 monthly subscription after that?
Oh, I see. So suddenly the lifetime value of that customer isn't $97 anymore. It's $500.
Exactly. The math completely flips in your favor. If a customer is worth $500 to my business over the next 6 months, I don't care that the ad costs spike to $116. Hell, I can afford to spend $250 to acquire them.
Wow. And that is the economic moat right there.
Yeah.
While your competitors are pulling their ads down because they just can't afford the rising costs, you are completely dominating the auction. You are buying up all the premium media, expanding your market share, and just suffocating your competition. Not because you have a cheaper ad, but because your back-end architecture extracts a higher lifetime value.
Precisely. You are no longer running a simple transaction. You are operating an economic ecosystem.
An economic ecosystem. Really love the weight of that phrase.
Yeah.
But to build an ecosystem that drastically increases a customer's lifetime value, you can't just blindly pull random people off the street. You have to be ruthlessly intentional about who you are inviting inside.
Right, which requires a complete shift from just shouting into the void to targeted extraction, which the book defines as the secret formula.
So the secret formula acts as basically the filtering mechanism before a single web page is even built. And it forces you to answer 4 distinct questions: who, where, bait, and result. Let's dissect the who first, because the source material is very aggressive about moving past lazy definitions.
Oh, incredibly aggressive.
Yeah, like we've all seen those generic customer avatars on whiteboards. Our target demographic is suburban men, aged 40 to 55, earning over $80,000 a year.
Which is practically useless data. I mean, demographics tell you the structural reality of a person, but they tell you absolutely nothing about their behavior or their anxieties or their true desires.
Right.
The formula demands you dig into psychographics, like what is the specific hyper-niche pain point waking them up at 3 a.m.? What bizarre search terms are they typing into Google in incognito mode? You aren't looking for a demographic bracket, you're looking for a specific psychological profile.
Okay, so once you have that hyper-specific profile, the second question is where? Like, where are these people hiding? And this brings up a paradigm shift in the text that I found absolutely brilliant: the concept of congregations.
Yes. The concept of congregations really explains why the internet is the greatest commercial tool in human history. Because prior to the digital age, gathering a highly specific group of people with a niche interest was a complete logistical nightmare.
Yeah, Brunson gives this really vivid example of being in high school before the internet really exploded. He remembers seeing like 5 or 6 kids huddled at a cafeteria table playing a super niche fantasy card game, probably Magic: The Gathering.
Right, exactly.
And they were totally geographically isolated. Maybe there were a handful of kids like them in every high school across the country, but they couldn't find each other. They couldn't communicate or organize.
But the internet solved that geographical isolation problem completely. It acts as a massive aggregator of fringe interests. Today, those hundreds of thousands of kids aren't isolated in cafeterias. They are perfectly clustered in highly active subreddits or dedicated Discord servers, niche email newsletters, specific YouTube comment sections. They have congregated.
So if I can use an analogy here to really solidify the mechanics of this,
Yeah.
traditional broad market advertising is essentially like renting a massive billboard on a busy interstate.
Okay, yeah.
You are paying a premium just hoping that out of the 2 million random cars driving by this month, a tiny fraction might actually care about what you sell.
Yeah.
But the congregation method, it's more like industrial mining.
I like that.
Right? You don't just start digging holes randomly in your backyard. You do the geological surveys to find the specific mountain where a massive vein of gold is already concentrated, and you sink your shaft directly into the ore.
And that subtle shift in perspective is just everything. The traffic already exists, the people are already gathered, you don't have to somehow manifest an audience out of thin air. Your only job is to find the congregation and place the right detour sign right in front of them.
Which naturally leads us to the third question of the formula. What bait do you use on that detour sign?
Well, once you locate the vein of gold, you obviously need the right tool to extract it. The bait has to be an offer so perfectly aligned with the psychographics of your dream customer that it creates almost an involuntary response.
Like what, for example?
It might be a physical book shipped directly to their door or a highly specific diagnostic tool, maybe an audio interview. But the psychological mechanism of the bait is twofold. It absolutely must be irresistible to your dream customer, and this is key. It must actively repel everyone else.
The repulsion is just as important as the attraction. You don't want the billboard effect, where every random tire kicker in the world clicks your ad and just drains your budget. You want an offer so incredibly niche that only the highly qualified buyer raises their hand. And then the final question of the formula. What result are you promising them? Like, where does this bait ultimately lead?
The result is the ultimate transformation you are providing. And understanding how to deliver that result in distinct increments is what finally transitions us from abstract strategy into tangible architecture. We move from the secret formula directly into the physical structure of the business, the value ladder versus the sales funnel.
Yes, okay. The value ladder is such a clarifying visual. The text describes it as a literal staircase, mapping out every single product and service your business offers. So on the bottom left, you have your lowest price and lowest value offering. As you climb up the stairs to the top right, the price increases exponentially, but so does the value and the intimacy of the solution provided.
Right, and the sales funnel, conversely, is just the digital mechanism, the actual sequence of web pages that physically facilitates a customer's movement up that ladder.
To really illustrate the psychological necessity of the value ladder, the author uses an incredibly visceral analogy, the process of going to the dentist.
Oh, it's brilliant because we've all experienced the underlying friction of this exact scenario. So you get a postcard in the mail offering a free teeth cleaning. That's the bait.
Right.
It's a low-barrier entry point designed to just get you into the physical space. You sit in the chair, the hygienist does the cleaning, and they've immediately provided tangible value. You trust them a little bit more than you did 20 minutes ago.
And at that precise moment of elevated trust, the dentist walks in and introduces the next rung on the ladder. He casually mentions, your teeth are looking healthy, but I noticed they're a little yellow from coffee. We could make some custom whitening trays for you while you're here.
Exactly. That is the front-end offer. It requires a small financial commitment, but because the trust has already been established, the friction is super low. You agree to the whitening.
Fast forward to your next visit. The trust deepens. The dentist notes that your teeth are shifting slightly and recommends a retainer to prevent future pain.
And this is the middle offer. The price point is obviously higher, but the perceived necessity and the established relationship make it a totally logical progression.
And as this relationship matures over years, eventually, the dentist might suggest complex cosmetic surgery or a full set of porcelain veneers. That is the back-end, high-ticket offer. And woven beneath this entire journey is the 6-month checkup, right? The continuity program that ensures predictable, recurring revenue.
Now, imagine removing the latter entirely. What happens if you strip away the progression of value and trust?
It creates an absolutely absurd social dynamic. It would be like a dentist walking up to you on the sidewalk, grabbing your arm and just saying, "Hi, I'm Dr. Smith. I want to drill into your skull and install a $10,000 set of porcelain veneers right now."
You would literally call the police.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the business equivalent of asking someone to marry you before you've even learned their name.
Yeah.
You haven't demonstrated competence, you haven't delivered micro value, and you certainly haven't earned the right to ask for a macro commitment.
Yet, that is exactly how the vast majority of digital businesses operate. They drive expensive traffic directly to a high-ticket offer or a complex core product, and then wonder why the conversion rate is a fraction of a percent.
Which is exactly what FitLife.tv was experiencing a version of. They were asking for the $97 transaction without any real ascension path.
Right. The core takeaway here is that before a single line of code is written or an ad is purchased, you have to engineer the ascension. What is the free bait? What is the $7 entry-level front end that offsets your ad costs? What is the $500 back end that generates the actual profit? And what is the continuity program that stabilizes your cash flow?
It is an architecture fundamentally built on trust. You provide immense value at a low threshold, proving your competence so the consumer naturally wants to ascend and exchange more capital for deeper value. But having a perfectly engineered psychological ladder is completely useless if it's just sitting in a dark, empty room. You need a crowd at the base of the stairs.
Yeah.
And the way you gather that crowd online completely redefines the concept of audience ownership.
Yes, this is where we really must dissect the ecosystem of internet traffic. The text categorizes the flow of human attention into 3 distinct buckets: traffic you control, traffic you don't control, and traffic you own.
Okay, let's bypass the basic definitions here. I think we all know that traffic you control is paid media bidding on search keywords, sponsoring newsletters, buying video ads. You dictate the destination of the click because you are paying a toll.
Right.
And traffic you don't control is the organic virality, the search algorithms, the suggested video feeds, the massive social media reach that could just vanish with a single back-end update.
What really requires deep analysis is the third bucket: traffic UOWN. The author makes a definitive, uncompromising statement here. The singular, overarching goal of the first 2 buckets of traffic is to convert them into the third bucket. If you are paying for clicks or generating organic views and not converting them into owned traffic, you are engaging in literal financial malpractice.
Now, I have to push back on this heavily. In the modern landscape, this insistence on owned traffic almost always translates to building an email list. But isn't email fundamentally an archaic medium?
I hear that a lot.
Right. I mean, we are talking about a technology from the 1970s. Open rates globally are hovering around 20% on a good day. Why does this framework treat an email list like it's some invincible, magical asset compared to, say, having 2 million subscribers on a massive modern video platform?
It's a completely valid critique, but it fundamentally misunderstands the economics of distribution. Having 2 million subscribers on a social platform provides the illusion of ownership, but you do not own the rails. The platform owns the rails. Think back to the FitLife.tv collapse. They had 1.2 million followers. When they posted a video, it went to 1.2 million feeds. But the platform realized that giving businesses free distribution was cannibalizing their own ad revenue. So they changed the algorithm to prioritize personal connections over brand pages. Overnight, a post that reached 1 million people reached 10,000. To reach the other 990,000 people who already opted in to follow them, FitLife now had to pay the platform.
Wow. So they basically became a tenant who suddenly got hit with a 10,000% rent increase.
Exactly. When you own an email list or a direct SMS list, you own the database. No algorithm sits between you and the consumer. You can write a message at 2:00 p.m., hit send, and physically bypass the gatekeepers to land directly in the personal inbox of 100,000 people by 2:01 p.m.
Yeah, that speed is unmatched.
Yes, open rates might be 20%, but that 20% is guaranteed algorithmic free distribution. You can quite literally print money on demand without ever paying a platform a cent for that specific cohort again.
The economics of a controlled distribution channel versus an algorithmic one. Okay, the math is undeniable when you put it like that. So the mechanism to achieve this ownership is what the book calls a squeeze page. And the psychology behind this specific type of web page is fascinating because it intentionally violates almost every rule of traditional web design.
It really does. Traditional web design is all about exploration. You land on a corporate homepage, and there's a massive navigation bar at the top. About us, services, blog, contact, careers. There are links in the footer. There are 3 different image carousels spinning.
It imposes a massive cognitive load on the visitor. It triggers the paradox of choice. When you give a human brain too many options, it literally paralyzes decision-making, and they usually just click the back button.
Exactly. A squeeze page eliminates the paradox of choice through absolute ruthlessness. It is a web page with exactly one objective and 0 alternative exits. There is no navigation bar. There is no About Us link. The entire page consists of a compelling headline highlighting the pain point, an image of the free bait you are offering to solve it, and a field to enter an email address.
It forces a binary decision. The visitor has only 2 options: enter their email address to claim the solution, or close the browser window. That's it. You are literally squeezing the visitor to make a micro-commitment.
And that micro-commitment is the exact moment the traffic transitions from an anonymous click you rented into an asset you own.
Okay, let's play this out. We've mapped our value ladder, we've tapped into a specific congregation, we routed that traffic to a squeeze page, they faced the binary choice, they opted in, and now their email address is sitting safely in our database. We own the traffic, we've won, but what happens the next morning?
Ah, right.
Because the reality is, if I just start bombarding this fresh email list with sterile high-pressure demands to buy my $500 back-end product, the unsubscribe rate is going to be staggering.
This represents the most dangerous chasm in the entire architecture. You have captured the lead, yes, but you have not captured their affinity. And this introduces a psychological concept that is perhaps the most powerful engine in the entire framework: the attractive character and the specific sequences used to communicate with the list.
The premise here cuts right to the core of human behavioral psychology. People do not form emotional attachments to faceless corporate logos. They don't pull out their credit cards because they are deeply moved by a sterile mission statement about, synergy.
Definitely not.
They buy from people. They form parasocial relationships with personalities they can relate to, aspire to be, or even occasionally disagree with. You have to engineer a persona, an attractive character.
And it is vital to clarify that attractive in this context has absolutely nothing to do with physical aesthetics. It refers to a magnetic pull. It's about crafting a persona that is deeply compelling. The architecture of a successful attractive character requires very specific elements.
Like what?
They must have a compelling backstory, usually a journey from failure to redemption. They must communicate through parables rather than direct lectures. They must openly acknowledge their own flaws and weaknesses, which builds immense empathy. And, most importantly, they must wield polarity.
Polarity is the concept that terrifies most traditional brand managers. The corporate instinct is to be as inoffensive and vanilla as possible to appeal to the widest possible market.
Right, don't upset anyone.
Exactly. But the text argues the exact opposite. If you try to please everyone, you become utterly forgettable. You have to take a hard stance on your specific methodologies or beliefs. You must be willing to actively alienate the people who aren't a perfect fit in order to create a tribal, rabid loyalty among the people who are.
Once this polarized, flawed, magnetic character is established, you do not just send them a generic weekly newsletter. The author prescribes 2 highly engineered communication protocols: the soap opera sequence and the Seinfeld emails.
The soap opera sequence is a masterclass in exploiting the Zeigarnik effect. For context for you listening, the Zeigarnik effect is a psychological principle stating that the human brain remembers uncompleted or interrupted tasks significantly better than completed ones. We literally cannot stand unresolved narratives. It creates a neurological itch.
Which is exactly why daytime soap operas have survived for decades. They end every single episode on a cliffhanger. They open a narrative loop, and the anxiety of the open loop forces the viewer to tune in the next day for the resolution.
Right.
The soap opera sequence maps this exact neurological trigger onto an automated 5-day email campaign that is triggered the moment someone joins your list.
Let's trace the psychological arc of these 5 days. So, day 1 is purely about setting the stage. You welcome them, you deliver the free bait you promised, introduce the attractive character, and immediately rip open a narrative loop.
Yes.
You end the email by saying something like, "Tomorrow, I'm going to reveal the single most catastrophic mistake that almost bankrupted me and the weird realization that actually saved my company. Look out for an email with the subject line, 'The 3 a.m. Panic.'"
You've created intense anticipation. Then on day 2, you deliver high drama. You don't start with marketing copy. You drop the reader right into the middle of a visceral, chaotic story. You describe hitting rock bottom, the debt, the stress, the failure. You make the reader feel the pain. But just as the story reaches its darkest point, you hint at a miraculous discovery, which you refuse to reveal until day 3.
The epiphany. Day 3 is where you finally close that massive loop. You reveal the core realization that turned everything around. And, not coincidentally, that epiphany is intimately tied to the core mechanism of the product you are actually selling. You align your personal breakthrough with the solution they can purchase.
Exactly. By day 4, you pivot to the hidden benefits. You focus on the unexpected, secondary, positive outcomes of your solution. So it's not just about losing weight, it's about the sudden surge in confidence that got you a promotion. You are basically expanding the perceived value of the outcome.
Makes sense.
And finally, day 5 brings the hammer down with urgency and a call to action. You synthesize the emotional journey of the last 4 days and give them a highly compelling, time-sensitive reason to step onto the first rung of your value ladder immediately.
It is a compressed, intense bonding experience. By day 5, the subscriber feels like they have literally lived through a trauma and a triumph with you. The parasocial bond is cemented.
Huh?
But what happens on day 6? You can't maintain high-stakes soap opera drama forever. It's exhausting for everyone.
Which is why you transition into the maintenance phase. The Seinfeld emails.
Named after the legendary sitcom famously pitched as a show about nothing.
Exactly. The underlying philosophy of the Seinfeld email relies on epistemic curiosity and the power of mundane relatability. These are daily emails that focus on normal, everyday observations. It might be a story about an argument you witnessed at a coffee shop, or a bizarre dream you had, or a mistake you made trying to assemble IKEA furniture. It is 90% pure entertainment.
But the magic trick is the pivot. You take this completely random, entertaining anecdote, and you seamlessly tie the underlying lesson back to a product pitch.
Right. You'd say, just like that wobbly IKEA table was missing a fundamental screw, most digital businesses are missing the foundational architecture. And boom, there's the link to your front-end offer.
Now, I can hear the collective anxiety of the audience spiking right now, sending an email every single day. The immediate assumption is that you will annoy your list, they will report you as spam, and your entire database will just incinerate itself in a week.
Yeah. That anxiety is rooted in the assumption that you are sending traditional corporate emails. If you send a daily email that just says, "Buy my product, it is 10% off," yes, your list will die a rapid death.
Obviously.
But the Seinfeld methodology operates on an edutainment model. Think about your favorite daily podcast or a radio show you listen to on your commute. Do you get annoyed that they broadcast every day?
No, I look forward to it. It's a parasocial habit.
Exactly, because they are providing entertainment value. If your emails are genuinely engaging, if they make the reader smile or think or nod in agreement before the pitch even happens, the frequency breeds familiarity, not contempt. The subscriber opens the email not because they want to buy something, but because they actually enjoy hearing from the attractive character.
It transformed your marketing from an interruption into a highly anticipated daily event. But let's take a massive step back here. We have discussed the psychology of the secret formula, the economics of the value ladder, the squeeze page mechanism, and the neurological hooks of email sequences.
It's a lot.
It is. Grasping this conceptually is empowering, but the thought of sitting down at a laptop, staring at a blank screen, and trying to invent this entire complex ecosystem from thin air, it's paralyzing.
The risk of failure is incredibly high if you rely solely on your own intuition. I mean, you could spend 6 months and $50,000 engineering what you think is a brilliant funnel, only to launch it and discover the market fundamentally rejects your premise.
Which introduces the final major paradigm shift to the text: reverse engineering, heavily popularized as funnel hacking. The core directive is absolute. Under no circumstances do you ever start with a blank page.
Never. You must let the market dictate the architecture. Before you write a single word of copy or design a single page, you identify the direct and indirect competitors who are already dominating your space. And you don't just passively look at their front-facing website, you become a forensic analyst. You pull out your credit card and you physically buy your way through their entire funnel.
You subject yourself to the architecture. The text details a fascinating case study where Brunson's company was attempting to launch a supplement for nerve pain, specifically neuropathy. They had a great product, but they were struggling to find the right congregation. They couldn't get the ad costs to balance out. So they decided to reverse engineer companies selling entirely different products, but to a similar demographic.
Right. And by using digital tracking tools to analyze the traffic sources of these tangential competitors, they unearthed an absolute goldmine of behavioral data. They discovered that the highest converting traffic wasn't congregating on general health blogs.
Where were they?
The deepest veins of highly motivated buyers were actually clustered on hardcore survivalist websites and highly specific diabetic forums.
Wow. They found the hidden congregations. By simply shifting their ad spend to target those specific veins of traffic, they took a supplement that was struggling to make $20,000 a month and scaled it to generate over $500,000 a month. $50,000 to $500,000, just by uncovering the invisible flow of traffic.
But the physical act of funnel hacking goes deeper than just finding the traffic source. When you buy a competitor's product, you are mapping the psychological sequence.
Well, let me pose a structural challenge to this idea. I hear funnel hacking, and I understand we aren't talking about illegally stealing intellectual property. We aren't copying their logos or plagiarizing their sales copy. But if thousands of entrepreneurs are all reverse engineering the top 3 successful funnels in an industry, doesn't that inevitably lead to total market saturation? Doesn't the landscape just become a sea of identical, cloned architectures that consumers eventually become blind to?
It's a very sophisticated concern, honestly, but it mistakes the vehicle for the destination. The architecture isn't a trendy tactic that fatigues. It is a framework based on fundamental human psychology, and human psychology just does not evolve that quickly.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Let's use a physical analogy. If you want to build a highly successful modern grocery store, you don't try to reinvent the concept of aisles and checkout counters. You study the best stores. You notice that they always put the fresh produce right at the entrance to trigger a psychological association with freshness. You notice they put the dairy and meat at the very back, forcing the customer to walk past thousands of other items to get the essentials.
You map the structural flow.
Right. You are noting the architecture of how humans prefer to navigate and purchase. When you build your grocery store, you use that identical floor plan. But the store isn't a clone because your branding, your customer service, your specific product selection, and the quality of your goods are totally unique to you.
Ah, I see.
In the digital space, you are mapping 5 specific variables: the demographic targeting, the structure of the offer like a free book leading to a $37 course, the layout of the landing page, the traffic sources, and the emotional angle of the ad copy. The structure works because the sequence of micro-commitments aligns with how humans build trust. Your unique, attractive character and your proprietary product prevent it from being a clone.
That distinction makes perfect sense. You are adopting a proven psychological flow, not just wearing a superficial mask. So let's synthesize this massive amount of information. We have all these potent concepts laid out on the table. How do they actually interlock? What is the master flow that transforms this from a collection of theories into a living, breathing commercial ecosystem?
The master flow really represents the author's cohesive worldview on the mechanics of modern commerce. If we trace the journey of a single customer, the genius of the system reveals itself completely.
It begins with the secret formula. You don't just guess who wants your product. You define the hyper-specific psychographic profile of your dream customer, and you locate the digital congregations where they are already gathering.
You then deploy traffic you control, so highly targeted paid ads directly into those congregations. But instead of sending that traffic to a confusing corporate homepage, you route them to a squeeze page.
The squeeze page offering a piece of bait so perfectly engineered to their pain points that they willingly surrender their email address. And the moment they hit submit, the dynamic shifts entirely. You have converted rented traffic into traffic you own.
Immediately, the automation takes over. Over the next 5 days, they receive the soap opera sequence, the narrative loops, the high drama, and the epiphany systematically build a parasocial bond with your attractive character.
And crucially, you don't wait 5 days to make an offer. The instant they opt in for the free bait, they're presented with the first rung of your value ladder. A low-friction, high-value front-end offer.
And if they pull out their credit card for that front-end offer, they officially enter the physical sales funnel. The architecture takes over. Before they even see a confirmation page, they are presented with a logical, higher-ticket upsell. You strike while the buying temperature is at its absolute peak, maximizing the lifetime value in minute one.
But what if they decline the upsell? Or what if they don't even buy the front-end offer to begin with? The system doesn't collapse. Because you own the distribution channel, they simply transition into receiving your daily Seinfeld emails. You provide them with continuous edutainment, keeping your attractive character top of mind, and gently pivoting back to the next logical step on the value ladder until they are psychologically ready to ascend.
The underlying philosophy here is profound. The traditional business model views a customer as a one-time resource to be extracted. This architecture views the customer relationship as an ascending scale of reciprocal value. It is a highly engineered ecosystem of trust.
It is incredibly comprehensive, but let's apply a lens of radical honesty here. The title of the book is .com Secrets. We've talked extensively about squeeze pages, email sequences, and digital funnels. Who is this framework actually designed for? Is it exclusively the domain of internet marketers selling digital courses and software?
The primary beneficiaries are undoubtedly information businesses, authors, coaches, consultants, e-commerce brand owners, and affiliate marketers. For those industries, this book operates as a literal step-by-step operating manual.
But let's look at the other side of the economy. What if you run a physical brick-and-mortar business? You own a landscaping company, or a boutique fitness studio, or a roofing business. Is this digital architecture totally irrelevant to the physical world?
The translation is actually seamless, and the author emphasizes this heavily. Recall the dentist analogy. The dentist operates a hyper-local physical business, but the acquisition architecture is entirely digital. A local physical therapist can run targeted social media ads, traffic they control, to a 10-mile radius. The ad offers a free digital guide on fixing lower back pain. That's the bait. The squeeze page captures the local leads.
Then the soap opera sequence builds the local authority, and the ultimate call to action isn't to buy a digital product, it's to book a discounted consultation in the physical clinic. The digital funnel is simply the net that drags the local congregation into the physical value ladder.
Precisely. However, we really must clearly define who this book is not for.
Right, it's not a magic spell.
It is absolutely not for anyone seeking a frictionless, get-rich-quick scenario. The structural engineering required to build these funnels demands intense discipline, a deep study of behavioral psychology, and the relentless testing of copy and offers. But beyond the hard work, there is a much more fundamental barrier. This entire system relies on the assumption that you have actual transformative value to provide on the back end.
That is the crux of it. A brilliant funnel acts as an amplifier. If your core product is garbage, if your high-ticket offering doesn't actually solve the consumer's problem, the funnel will simply accelerate the destruction of your reputation. You cannot use psychological architecture to mask a fundamental lack of value.
Exactly. The architecture assumes competence. If you have the competence, the architecture scales it.
So we arrive at the ultimate question. What does all of this mean for you, listening to this breakdown right now? We have mapped out the grand strategy today. We've explored the economic imperatives, the psychological frameworks, and the master flow of the modern digital ecosystem. But in the spirit of radical transparency, we have to admit something. We have barely scratched the surface of the source material.
Oh, absolutely. We have outlined the blueprint, but the actual construction requires a much deeper study of the schematics.
Exactly. Inside the pages of .com Secrets, the conceptual framework is broken down into highly tactical execution. The author details 23 specific building blocks you need to actually assemble these funnels. He provides the literal word-for-word scripts for components like the perfect webinar, which is a psychological presentation structure responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. He provides the exact page-by-page blueprints for the 7 core funnels he uses daily.
It's a massive amount of actionable data.
It is. So if you are listening to this and you realize that your business has a funnel problem, or if you are ready to stop relying on algorithmic luck and want to build a controllable economic ecosystem, there's a very natural next step. There is a complete audio available, several hours long, that covers every single chapter of this book in granular depth. It contains the detailed explanations, the specific historical examples, and the actionable step-by-step takeaways for every single phase of the funnel architecture we discussed today.
Yeah, and this isn't a hard pitch. It's simply the most logical progression if you want to move from understanding the theory to executing the strategy.
Right. Check the link in the description if you are ready to go deeper and actually master this material.
As you process everything we've unpacked today, I want to leave you with a slight shift in perspective. Early on, we talked about making the invisible processes visible. Today, we've essentially handed you the X-ray vision required to see how modern commerce actually functions. Tomorrow, when you are scrolling through your feed and you inevitably see an ad offering a free plus shipping physical book or an invitation to an exclusive masterclass, just pause. Don't just look at the surface level offer. Look at the architecture beneath it. Trace the sequence backward. Analyze the psychological triggers on the landing page. Monitor the narrative loops in the email follow-ups. And look for the immediate upsell. Recognize that you are walking through a carefully engineered psychological gauntlet.
You can finally see the code in the matrix.
You really can. And once you can see the architecture clearly, you are left with a fundamental choice. Are you going to spend the rest of your life simply acting as a consumer, walking through other people's funnels? Or are you going to take control and start building the architecture yourself?
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.